So let's talk about this breaking news, this new stimulus bill overnight. So this comes from the House Democrats in the Congress, and we'll talk about that side of it in a moment. But let's be honest. America's stimulus plan has been a failure. The current structure of the stimulus bill that was passed back at the end of March has been rolled out in a hodgepodge mess. There are all kinds of different programs. There's certain programs over here, there's certain programs over here, and they all kind of combined in some sort of a mesh network of a stimulus bill. But the rollout has been a mess. The implementation has been a mess. And because different agencies, different loan programs have been set up, it has not worked. It has not worked well. And so much so that we learned yesterday from Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin that over $1 trillion has not even been spent yet. It's there, but it hasn't been spent. Remarkable, right? So the money exists, it hasn't been rolled out. Why not? Unemployment benefits have not been rolled out to people. I saw this morning someone in the chat said, look, I've been out of work now. I still been waiting for unemployment benefits. I haven't got it. Where is this money? It's sitting there. So needless to say, the rollout of the stimulus bill, while ambitious from Congress, they really put a lot of weight behind it and sounded great, but it's been really a mess when compared to other countries. So Australia, Canada, Denmark, Germany, other countries have put in stimulus bills that have injected about $2,000 a month to their citizens, also made paycheck protection programs in place for employers to retain employment, and those have all followed a very similar path. Australia, Canada, Germany, etc. They're all very similar in structure. Why did the United States decide to go it alone, do this hodgepodge mess like we love to do, right? We love to say we're the greatest country in the world, and then we're like, we're going to do it our way, right? And then it ends up being a mess. So now members of Congress are paying attention to Australia. They're paying attention to what Canada did, and they're implementing a brand new bill that would be very similar, even more ambitious than Australia and Canada. So what it's called is the Paycheck Recovery Act, and it was brought up by Ms. Jayapal, Pramila Jayapal. She is the congresswoman who put this act forward. And Janet Yellen has praised this idea as a smart, quick, and effective way to channel aid to workers through their firms. The bill is only really one sign of the idea's growing popularity right now. Yesterday, almost 100 House Democrats introduced this more ambitious version of the program. And you have senators from Josh Hawley, a Missouri Republican, to Doug Jones, an Alabama Democrat, to Bernie Sanders. All are pursuing versions of what Ms. Jayapal put out there, which is very interesting. So it would be a new paycheck subsidy program, similar to the ones that Australia and others have put in place. It would be grants, not loans, and as up to about 80% of payroll cost, up to about $60,000 per year, worker and annual salary. But hers goes further. Okay, so let's go through this. Here it is. Here's a copy of the bill. Take a look at this. This is the Paycheck Recovery Act, and it's subtitled Stopping Mass Unemployment While Supporting Businesses and Their Workers. So she says we are in an unprecedented economic and public health crisis that requires unprecedented solutions. So I'm going to read from the bill now because it goes on that says, if relief does not reach workers and businesses soon, the consequences, she says, will be dire. Now, this is similar to what we've been hearing from Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. So this is in alignment with that. Very similar, so I'm encouraged by this. I'm going to go through some of the key features of this new stimulus bill. Again, this is called the Paycheck Recovery Act. So one of the highlights here is businesses, nonprofits, states, and local governments of all sizes that are facing COVID-19 related revenue losses above 10% gross receipts would be eligible, as well as independent contractors, domestic workers, and gig workers. State and local governments would receive $146 billion to keep their employees on payroll. Entities would also receive an initial 3-month lump sum grant payment. and it would be retroactive back to March 1st. It would be payroll and benefits up to $90,000 salary. So if you have an employee who lost their job, is losing their job, furloughed, etc., and it would allow them to pay up to $90,000 of that person's salary retroactively back to March of this year. That's pretty fantastic. It would also make Republicans happy because the idea is that we get workers back to work. Employers can actually remain solvent, which is what Jerome Powell wants. Workers back to work, money in their pockets, and it would basically protect those those employees from having to lose their jobs. It would also get them off of the unemployment benefits. Now, this bill, while expensive, would be nowhere near as expensive as what we've seen in some of those other proposals, like the HEROES Act. Employers must, I'm reading now from this, must keep workers on the payroll and benefits. They must also still retain their benefits in order to meet the conditions of getting this grant program. So it's not a loan, it'd be a grant. The program would cover employees who were furloughed or laid off after March 1st, 2020. If they are brought back onto payroll, they would be covered under this plan. This would immediately substantially reduce the unemployment rate, she says in this bill. And I agree. You bring a substantial number of people off of unemployment and back into employment. The program would automatically renew your unemployment rate below 7% for 3 months in a row. Now, if an employer's tax return for 2020 shows that they did not experience a 10% punch to the stomach, the employer will repay the grant as determined by the Treasury Secretary. So like, let's say you got an 8% hit, punch to the stomach, right? You would repay this grant according to the Treasury Secretary's payback. Otherwise, it would be a no interest loan. It'd be a 5-year, but no later than 5 years and no interest at all on this loan in that way. Okay, here are some more key points of this. Keep workers tied to employers, keep workers on health care and other benefits. It would be universal because 80% of employees earn less than $70,000. The vast majority of the program's funds would go right to the low and middle wage workers in the bottom 3 quartiles, as they call it. It'd be a public health and recovery plan. It would remove economic pressures for businesses and workers to return. It'd be flexible for partial or full business operations, so you don't have to worry about being a full-time business at the moment. It would be a simple mechanism to prevent abuse, fraud, and overpayments, which we've seen fraud and other kinds of craziness already running rampant. And there would be better mechanisms to help low-wage workers and minority business owners. So that, my friends, is the Paycheck Recovery Act. Now, it looks like it's been, it's supplemental to what we've also seen from the HEROES Act. So in this way, it would not be an injection of paychecks to people, like giving you $2,000 or $1,200 right now. This would be supplemental, separate from the HEROES Act. This would specifically be for those people who are unemployed. And this gets to the heart of what President Trump and Treasury Secretary Mnuchin are hoping for, which is getting people back to work, but also making sure that that GDP is kept in check, that gross domestic product. Remember, 70% of America's GDP is driven by you paying for groceries, paying for gas, being a part of the economy. 70%. So by getting you back to work, getting that stability in the workforce keeps that GDP stable, which is what Republicans definitely want on that side. But it does not address, however, the need for that immediate injection of cash into the hands of the American people. So this is the very latest on this new stimulus called the Paycheck Recovery Act, making its way through Congress. It has a lot of support. Hundreds of members of Congress are throwing their support behind some version of this right now, and on the Senate side as well, Republicans and Democrats. So when you ask me, what of all of these things do I think has a chance of passing the most? a version of this, an employment-backed paycheck protection program for the American worker to get back into the workforce, businesses to keep producing, and our GDP to remain stable. So that's where I think the biggest likelihood of payment here. But I also think that Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve is still pushing for an injection of cash into the hands of the American people, because this only addresses those people who've lost their jobs. What about the people who are out of work? Totally. Who are not getting a stimulus, who are at home and don't work. What about those individuals? What kind of a stimulus payment can we get to those people to help cover their costs, their utility bills? We saw one gentleman write to us the other day that said he's living under an overpass right now in Louisiana. How can we help those people? Let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts on this new Paycheck Recovery Act? This is breaking news, the very latest from Congress, and it's getting a lot of people talking and a lot of legs right now from bipartisan support across both chambers of Congress right now. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and please subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber.